Here now for some analysis, CBSN political contributor, Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, also Nomiki Konst, a Democratic strategist and Bernie Sanders supporter. Let's start with you then. You just heard to the you just heard what Jeff Weaver had to say, specific to perhaps the ratcheting tenor and tone of this campaign as we look ahead today to Wisconsin and perhaps 2 weeks from now here in New York. What did you make of what he had to say?
Well, I think he's spot on. I mean, one of the things that I think the media has been overemphasizing is this tone change, when the reality is this has been a very light. I mean, they have been so respectful of each other. Only in the past few weeks has it started to get a little bit more nasty, and I'm going to blame it completely on Hillary Clinton. You know, she flipped the switch and she said, oh, well, you know, Bernie Sanders is a liar and he's been changing his tone. All he's been doing from day one is pointing out the differences in record. And as we get closer, as the race tightens, as it is in Wisconsin, he's going to make out those points even more clear. He's going to call out the fact that she's throwing fundraisers with billionaires, that she's accepting money from lobbyists. The lobbyists are bundling $4.5 million from the oil and gas industry. I mean, these are all important issues that show what a candidate's record is compared to their rhetoric, and that's what the voters want to know. And fair point. I mean, everybody knows Bernie Sanders has a clean record on this. He's not trying to be somebody else. This is who he is. He's been this man for 30 years, and she's basically trying to put him on the defensive by calling him a liar when the truth lies in the FEC reports. It's not hard to look up this information. People are very smart. Bernie Sanders supporters are very smart. We have information at our fingertips. People can connect the dots. And one more point, just to lay out, to overemphasize, I should say, how Hillary Clinton's accepting funny money. She has a bunch of super PACs out there right now, raising millions of dollars, and they don't have to disclose who their donors are. Those super PACs are giving money to an organization called Correct the Record, which is also a Hillary organization out there to set the message for the Clinton campaign. That organization can give money to her campaign. So essentially, she's funneling money the way Wall Street does, the way these overseas tax havens do. I mean, there's no difference between the people who sent our economy into chaos and what Hillary Clinton is doing on the campaign right now.
And yet, Leslie, she might say, we're just playing the game as the rules are written.
That is child's play, what is going on the Democratic side compared to what is going on. Let's just put it in context. This is like, throwing a little sand on somebody. That is nothing to say what their contentious relationship is compared to what the general election is going to look like. I think you have to realize this is not a game for weaklings. Political campaigns are going to be tough. I think what's interesting there is when that is really the pain point for Hillary Clinton is when you're talking about following the money and all the dark money that is moving throughout the campaigns and really funneling her effort because she is the establishment candidate, but she's also been building and raising that fundraising apparatus for more than 8 years. So it's really a given that something like that would take place. I think that's probably the most interesting point on that. But I think the momentum is also interesting and shifting in terms of how many Bernie Sanders people are coming out, and juxtapose that next to Donald Trump supporters who normally benefits, like we've talked about earlier today, from large turnouts and large crowds, but that's not necessarily going to be the case today. The fact that he's lost 11 points in support, according to polls from mid-February to where he is right now, shows that this Teflon coat and this narrative around Donald Trump is starting to get old. I think there's some fatigue there.
Well, and to that, again, this is Wisconsin will have center stage, and whoever emerges victorious is going to have now some time to marinate in this momentum. We've seen Bernie Sanders do it after sweeps of weekends, after a win for him in Michigan. To Donald Trump, however, if the numbers suggest in most polls that there will be a comfortable victory for Ted Cruz tonight, seeing him perhaps make these very late in the game adjustments. We saw Melania Trump speak very rarely yesterday, perhaps a response to some historically low numbers with women and shoring up there. We've seen him hire Paul Manafort perhaps to take over the search for delegates at the state, at the local level. And now today, a story from the Washington Post saying that he is going to look to block billions of dollars heading back over the border from immigrants here in the U.S. to Mexico. Experts saying this would devastate the Mexican economy to build that wall. What do you make of the sense of the campaign, of the relative calm or not so much?
Sure. I think a couple of things. I'm really glad you talked about the remittances to Mexico, the $25 billion. We saw Katrina talking about that. I think it's an act of desperation. It is just as desperate as saying we're going to build a wall. It's nonsensical. There's not a lot of solution to that. It sounds good in a soundbite. It's the kind of thing that has propelled his campaign to this point. But when you start looking at remittances, it's a very complicated issue, and it's just a knee-jerk thing that I think a lot of people in conservative talk radio have been talking about for a long time. What's interesting about that is when you think about talk radio, there is a group of 6 that it was reported today in the New York Times, 6 talk radio show hosts who are really never Trump kind of launching this campaign, who have been visceral in terms of their attacks and tethering him to his non-policies. It's starting to have an effect. It's been having an effect, I mean, among the 70% who do not want Donald Trump, but this is the state that's really going to be the linchpin in pointing out that there needs to be another alternative that's really setting up the case for June. So I think you're right on that. And also, if you look at the head-to-head matchups, we were just looking at the numbers today, Clinton against a hypothetical against a Ted Cruz, it's almost a dead heat. Clinton against a Donald Trump, and she wins by 10 points. So this continued argument that this false campaign that Donald Trump has put together that did really well to get him to this point is not gaining any additional traction to get him to the next point. And that's why you're seeing these moves on, let's attack Mexico, let's bring some people who understand the establishment and how party politics work, and fundamentally, let's see if we can make Ted be lying Ted.
Because we've seen his numbers. While they haven't dropped, and that's what his supporters will tell you, his supporters remain steadfast. I mean, perhaps we're also seeing that there is something of a hard cap on just how much he can increase that support. And if that support remains where we're seeing it now, it does not suggest good days ahead for the Trump campaign.
Right. Populism only matters so much in presidential primaries. It's really unfortunate the way that primaries are run. They're run by parties. They're not run by the FEC. There's no laws really surrounding them, unfortunately, except for party rules. And those party rules are murky. The problem is Donald Trump has not been friendly to the party. So, that populism only takes him so far in the campaign. And now you're seeing, as we see, the organization behind maybe Paul Ryan, some sort of fresh face, as Karl Rove likes to say, that they're actively unifying to challenge Donald Trump. Now, what I saw the past couple of days were some reports that Donald Trump has been meeting with lobbyists, and I think that he's trying to make this move, by hiring a convention person to try to understand the system, but I think it's too little too late. I mean, he has an active campaign against him right now by some very intelligent people that weren't united before, and that's why they couldn't take him on, because there were just too many candidates.
She raises a really interesting point when you're talking about understanding the party politics, what happens here. So basically what the Trump campaign has laid out is, there's no way if I get within 100 delegates that you think I'm going to quietly go off into the night, that it was going to be a mano-a-mano kind of combat on the floor, where it becomes a lot about party folks like delegates versus second, third ballot. We hear a lot about that. But what's really interesting is there are very few people who have a long history of the political muscle it takes to gather folks, and it's all about party favors. If you do this for Trump, then we're going to look at benefiting you when you want to run for office back home in your region. I mean, there's so much that goes into the backstory of delegates.
So he's playing catch up there. It's also obviously why John Kasich is going to hang around until Cleveland. I mean, and you mentioned the numbers against the purported general election opponent in Hillary Clinton. John Kasich beats her in a lot of those polls. Also, very quickly, I want to ask you, Charles Koch, according to the Huffington Post today, was telling friends that he thinks Paul Ryan, House Speaker, who says, I don't want it, in part because I don't want to deal with the Trump supporters who might then react, that Paul Ryan would be a shoo-in at a contested convention. So are we, if nothing else, quickly, are we going to look back and say it all happened in Wisconsin, that the Stop Trump movement found its footing in Wisconsin?
Maybe. I mean, one of the things that I read in that report about the Koch brothers is that they looked at Paul Ryan as being this guy who's anti-establishment, a fresh face, has the amazing ability to work with the establishment, even though he is anti-establishment, and more importantly, at this point when there is that hunger, he's like the guy who can swoop in. And he did this when he did his. It's almost the same exact strategy he used. No, I don't want it. I don't want it when he became House Speaker. So you're seeing a lot of the same paths, the path that he took that way.
Yeah, no, 1-2 punch. Slow Trump, find an alternative. Nobody really thought it was going to be Ted Cruz. That's the challenge the Cruz campaign has.
July. It feels like it's right around the corner.
Just
doesn't it?
around the corner.
Yep.
Leslie, no, we appreciate
Thank you so
the time.
much.